Hello everyone and welcome back to What a Barb, a Polin podcast. We're in the promised lands of season 4, part 2. I have a full house with me today. We have Veg, returned from overseas. She's back from South Africa. I have Lecky, who is still in the same place she has been before, but great to have you here. I have Beans. Beans, it's lovely to have you. We've not heard your luscious voice. Actually, we did hear your luscious voice at the end of our last episode, which was quite a roller coaster. And you weren't miles off, to be honest. Yeah, we basically had like women's American basketball happening. She was almost in the Americas. Right. So well done to you for your predictions.
Thank you.
We're of course here to talk about part 2. First of all, how is everyone doing? Lecky, Veg, Beans. Absolute silence.
So Obs has scared us because there's little editing energy left. So we're all being on our best behaviour.
And I said, if anyone speaks over anyone else, you're all dead.
Yeah.
So put your hand up if you would like to speak. So no one's now speaking.
Well, I don't have much news. My dog was sick earlier this week, but she's better now.
Good. Vegetable, what's going on? How was South Africa?
It was great. The standout of the trip. We went to this wine farm, which used to be the home to a pig who painted pictures.
Oh, that's great.
Used to.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, the pig is no longer with us.
Oh, rest in peace. Another death, another blow. Jesus Christ, when does it end? We have John, we have Lord Featherington. Now we've got this pig who painted.
He was called Pig Casso.
Oh.
Or potentially she. And I saw the paintings, and then I learnt that Pig Casso had inspired another animal, a sheep, known as Banksy.
Wow, I'm seeing a theme.
And looking at these pictures up in the farm that they'd painted, I just cried, and I think I've decided to not eat meat.
Be fully vegetarian. Yeah.
I love whenever you're on these vacations, you come to these big decisions in your life.
Life revelations.
It's like you're in Canada and you're like, I'm a lesbian.
Yeah. Yeah, but specifically then I decided to get some edibles because it's legal in Canada, and I had a big life revelation on top of Mount Royal in Montreal. It was lovely.
Oh.
But Veg being a vegetarian is just out in the open.
Oh yeah, there we go. And now I'm back with 2 very clingy cats who are so sweet.
Beanlet, how is the life of a bean?
Pretty low key. My sister had a baby. My mom was down there for 3 months. She came back. She called me. She goes, I'm moving back to where your sister is. I said, okay. And she goes, I feel better now that I know you have a friend group and aren't alone. I said, okay. Oh, thanks.
Aww. Yeah.
But other than that,
You started a new job?
I did. I started a new job, ironically editing more podcasts.
It sounds super cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It's been pretty chill. I mean, everybody I've worked with is cool. It's a lot less intense than, ironically, for the stuff I'm editing, it's a lot less intense than the editing for What a Barb.
That's funny. Obs, how are you?
I am all right. I'm back in London next week, guys. Whoop, whoop.
Oh, did you find a place?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't have a place to live. No. Don't be so ridiculous, Beans. Why would I have organised somewhere to move into?
I thought maybe you decided to rent out that one decaying door apartment.
That was a great place.
It did have a nice view.
It was like beautiful room, and then it was decaying and there was mold in every corner. And I was like, do I have standards in life? And the answer realistically is no. But yeah, I have a new job that I'm starting a week on Monday. So
What?
Oh, holy shit.
It's a whole thing. So yeah, back in London, hopefully. But no, I don't have anywhere to live.
So she has to go look for somewhere to live this week. Oh, also, you have a guest on this recording.
Yes.
So we may get some interruptions here and there.
I have my dog in the background. I'm sorry, guys. She's here. She might make some noises. We're just going to roll with it because we do not have time to sort that out.
Right.
So welcome to the pod to my dog. Editing Obs here. Just wanted to say so sorry for the delay in getting this episode to you. As you'll be able to tell, we recorded the episode pretty quickly after part 2 came out, but a few big life things meant that it just hasn't been possible to get the episode out until now. So we're so sorry. We hope you've been enjoying watching part 2 in the meantime. In this episode, we're going to chat about our general reactions, and then we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into episodes 5 and 6. And then we're actually going to do another episode where we talk more about episode 7, episode 8, and our thoughts about Whistledown, our speculations about the future. So we will be back as soon as we can with the rest of our reaction. But for now, enjoy the episode. Well, guys, we're here for a very special occasion. Part 2 has happened to us all. We have watched it. Veg, I think you watched it on a plane. Am I right in saying that?
It's true. 2 planes.
Was it good entertainment for the plane?
I think episodes 5 and 6 dragged a little for me, but it kept me entertained on the plane while I ate my licorice. Everyone else, what were you guys' first impressions?
Well, we all watched it together.
That was fun.
Yeah, except, I mean, Veg was on a plane, so we didn't get to, like, chat with her. But, I think season 4 had the same issues as season 3. However, I think it tied up everything better in season 4. I thought it was very beautiful and light and fun in part 1. And then part 2 was so sad the entire time. And like, I also felt as if I was more compelled by other storylines than I was the main character.
I felt the same way. I think that this season's strengths were a lot in the subplots, especially in part 2. I feel like I was so invested in the Fran's journey over the course of these 4 episodes.
Oh my God, yeah.
All the other subplots and stuff were great too. I feel like the subplots in general were a lot stronger. I like how they tied into the main narrative more. I expected to be a little more swept up in the main love story than I think I was based on the trailer. We can get into that more later. I do think that Benophie had some really good moments, but I felt like I didn't get fully invested until after John's death, just because I knew it was coming, and I felt like that was distracting me for a lot of episodes 5 and 6.
Yeah. I agree. I think the central love story is one of those things, and a lot of our listeners who've spoken to have said this as well, where it's like different tropes for different folks, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not every trope is for everyone. And like, we specifically all like a similar trope because that's how we literally became friends. Like, we wouldn't be here having this conversation if we hadn't have liked like the friends to lovers trope.
Yeah.
I also like really like enemies to lovers, but love at first sight and everything like that isn't my personal trope. And I think if you're not invested in love at first sight, then it's kind of like a hard one to sell because it's kind of predicated on like this magical moment that you have to really believe in as like a concept. And so some of our listeners has absolutely like loved the Benophie story and was completely swept away with it. And then some have said, I enjoyed it, but it's a trope that I don't necessarily resonate as much with.
Yeah.
It's similar to how like season 1, I didn't really resonate with like the Daphne story the whole time. It's just how different stories are for you. But I think part 2 was a lot stronger for me than part 1 was. Again, because I think like you say, Lecky, I think the death in episode 6 completely elevated the story and like the depth of the storytelling and it like really challenged the characters in a way that I think everyone benefited from.
But at the same time, it's kind of like the Lady Whistledown drama in season 3, where it's like hanging over your head for so long. You're kind of just waiting for
the shoe clip to drop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what some of our listeners thought then, shall we? Sister Spooky said, I really enjoyed this season. I found it easy to sit back and become immersed in the story. I cried, I laughed, I gasped in shock, and I screamed, don't lay down at John when he said he had a headache. I really couldn't have asked for more. Moon Pie loved season 4. Again, it was a really easy watch. It reminded me of season 1 with the primary focus on the leads, that good overall narrative coherence with the interesting side stories.
Season 1 did have the pig subplot, I just have to say.
Yeah.
The best subplot there's ever been. Pigs are featuring heavily in this episode.
I will give it that compliment that I felt it was the most like season 1 in terms of things were more wrapped up.
Yeah. Well, Heelske said that they liked it and was a little bit jealous of so many things that season 4 got that season 3 didn't. So talking about the copious amounts of the family scenes, flashbacks, a happy wedding.
Yeah.
Heelske said that they don't usually love super heavy drama, but they didn't mind it this time, even though Fran's story was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Maeve enjoyed Sophie and Benedict and all the side plots. And I think that's a good point. I think Beans, you might have mentioned it, that the side plots this season or this in part 2, because they were very closely related to the main story, they felt a lot more natural when you were watching them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you're trying to have this main love story, like Polin, for example, and then you're like randomly going off on this completely disconnected story and you're like, why are we caring about this when we should be with the main drama and we're like going off this thing that doesn't really matter? But because it felt way more integrated, you didn't feel as like, oh, where are we going with this? It felt like a whole cohesive narrative, which I think was better.
Yeah.
And Maeve pointed out, of course, the Polin of it all loved the love between Colin and Penelope. And they might not have been there a lot, but we did get them and we will speak of them, fear not. Late loved the writing, saying it was stellar, much better than last season. Again, highlighting the fact that the subplots were woven together much nicer. However, Rocky Road has pointed out, I think I said this to you when we were watching it. Rocky Road has a problem with, do you know, this is a Netflix thing, not a Bridgerton thing now as well, where they're doing tell not show. In fact, Beans, was this you where when we were watching it, someone pointed out like, oh my God, they just keep saying things over and over again instead of like progressing the story sometimes.
Yeah.
So you spend a lot of time reiterating like the maids and the mistresses are not moving as much.
I've heard it's a second screen thing.
Yes. I think I said this in one of our podcasts where Bridgerton has an issue where oftentimes they just tell us things rather than letting things be revealed. And they partially do that because people aren't always paying attention. Like they're looking at their phones or they're doing whatever. And so now for like Netflix shows and stuff like that, they write it so that things are being repeated in case you miss it if you weren't paying attention. But I don't love it. I don't love it.
I felt like it was really noticeable this season too, because there's actually quite a few instances where characters are describing or reiterating things we've learned before.
Yeah.
For example, we'll have like that really beautiful scene where Lady Danbury and Queen Charlotte are wordlessly conveying that Queen Charlotte is letting Lady Danbury go, and the acting speaks for itself.
Yes.
But then you have other scenes like Sophie telling Alfie what has transpired with her and Benedict in part 1, which is actually like, they tried to turn it into a comedic beat, but basically she's summarizing everything that's happened in part 1. And then later we have characters reiterating why Sophie and Benedict can't be together because of society and the class differences. So I feel like it's a little bit more noticeable that they're doing a lot of expository dialogue.
Yeah.
Maybe to the show's detriment at some points.
Yeah.
Like Queen Charlotte's decision to let Lady Danbury go. You can do that without any dialogue whatsoever, which is so beautiful. So I wish they wouldn't rely so much on explaining things to the audience and kind of trust the audience to figure things out themselves.
I read a really interesting piece about like how streaming services are now creating shows that adhere to like the second screen kind of behavior that users are doing. And I it's not great, but I think it might be that they're sort of thinking people aren't going to be watching as closely. They're going to be on their phone, they're going to be playing a game or browsing something, which I've been guilty of for like shows I'm less interested in.
Yeah.
And so that is why sometimes it's a bit more like, oh, what have you got there, Colin? Is that Lady Whistledown?
Which I have a rebuttal to that because I feel like these streaming services think people are stupid, you know, when they're watching it too.
Yeah.
And my rebuttal is The Pit. The Pit is the show that came out on HBO and it's on its second season. Basically goes through one shift at a hospital and each episode is 1 hour into that shift. And I literally don't look anywhere like else when I'm watching that show because it like compels you to pay attention. I think the issue is they need to be more compelling in their writing. They need to hook us, things like that. And they're not doing that when they just do the tell not show because we know that we'll hear it in the background. Yeah.
And it really stilts the progression of like the pacing, doesn't it? Because you're just stopping and starting.
Yes.
I was having a conversation with Lecky earlier today about like virality, because that's another like motivation for like not just TV shows, but like all media is heavily focused on virality. And it's really interesting to see like what moments do go viral from the show. And if you look back at it, like season 1 was kind of viral in itself because the whole concept of the show was like kind of brand new. So like just the notion of it kind of went viral. But season 2, it was the argument between Anthony and Kate, I would say. It wasn't like a sex scene or anything. It was the bane of my existence. Season 3, yes, it was the carriage scene, which of course is like a sex scene in a way, but it was very character driven and it was narrative driven. And it was all about storytelling. And then I think with season 4, what's been interesting is, I don't want to make assumptions, but it felt like they were trying to push things like the staircase going viral, things like the bathtub scene going viral. And actually what's gone viral, and I apologize because I have wrecked our Instagram algorithm for the podcast. If you go on our thing.
For part 2, we should say.
For part 2.
Because part 1 was I'm the tea you were having.
Yeah, so that went viral. But I think people connected to Violet's like genuine sort of appraisal of herself and then her confidence. I think they connected with that journey of it. And then in part 2, what's gone viral is Francesca, that scene with Francesca and Violet.
Yeah.
Which is about character and storytelling and a very genuine moment. So it's like one of those lessons, I think, not just to the show, but to all sorts of media, that sometimes you don't need to like try and manufacture something to go viral. If you just really dedicate yourself to like honest storytelling, those moments will resonate naturally. And that's what people capture. And yes, it means that every time I now go on Instagram, every single fucking reel that is shown to me is the exact same bit of Francesca saying she has nothing. And I sit and cry every single time.
Yeah, don't worry, same.
I will say Hannah Dodd's acting in that scene is so good. Like, I would just sit there and watch that scene a dozen times in a row anyway.
So well done. And that's the thing, though, is the women in the season, when we talked about it in the first part, were powerhouses.
Yeah.
Their stories were so compelling, so well done. Everyone's, Violet's, Fran's, I mean, even Hyacinth and Elle, like, I wasn't as drawn to them as the other ones. But, like, they were just, like, stunning performances from the women this season.
Yeah.
And I, like, you were talking about the sex scenes just several seconds ago. I barely even remember them from the season. And to be honest, I actually didn't care that there were even sex scenes in this season at all. I was like, I'm glad there were less than, like, the last few seasons.
Yeah. Well, I think our friend Purple Cat sums up our thoughts very well by saying, I enjoyed part 2 more than part 1. Benedict slowly becomes less annoying as he suffers more, and how I like to see that man suffer. True.
Ben doit souffrir.
On the topic of Benedict suffering, we'll go episode by episode. Again, we have to cover 4 episodes in one podcast episode. There's no way on earth we can go into great depth. All we're going to do is kind of follow the narrative, pick out a couple of moments. Some of our listeners on Patreon have asked us a few questions. So if we can't cover every moment and we miss something important, we apologise, but this is just like an initial reaction to things that kind of caught our eye with the story. We start with episode 5, yes or no. I'll say that this was my least anticipated episode going in. I thought I would enjoy this the least, but I actually really enjoyed it. I think there were some great family moments in there.
Yeah.
So it's like a nice surprise in a way. But should we start with where part 1 leaves off then? So obviously the main cliffhanger is Benedict asks Sophie to be his mistress. She says, get the fuck out, I'm going out with my girls.
Yeah.
Varley moves in with the Penwoods next door to the Bridgertons. So how do we pick back up? Well, with the Benophie story in episode 5 is very much preoccupied with Benedict kind of atoning for his mistress' sin. There's like an interesting tension between them the whole episode that sort of takes up, again, the yo-yoing yes or no. But we start with, Beans, in your predictions at the end of the episode, you had like a moment where you're like, Sophie goes out with her girls and she does like a string, like there's a string quartet. I think one of our listeners were like, single ladies can play.
Yeah.
And that's not far from how the episode actually opens. Like she's out in the town, kind of depressed.
Yeah.
And she's with Footman John and Hazel. And I really loved Footman John is like whispering what I assume he wishes were like sweet nothings in Hazel's ear as like Sophie very sadly looks on. Oh, and if you look closely, she's definitely wearing her necklace, but I guess Benedict was kind of distracted by other things on the stairs.
But yeah, the huge preoccupation for this episode is that aftermath. And it was interesting to see how the general public reacted to that episode 4 ending and like the mistress thing, because it was always a bit of a gamble to like cut the narrative there, wasn't it? Because it's not like a complimentary moment for the character. And I think the episode is a sort of trying to get back with Benedict and seeing his perspective, I guess. Because to be honest, I spent a lot of the episode being really pissed at him. So he had like a big way to go.
I will say, to their credit, it is a decision to end with something that portrays like one of your leads in such a negative light. Yeah. And I think somebody said they went to one of the screenings of episode 5 and Jess Brownell and Tom Verica were there, and they were asked, the audience was asked if they liked the split season, and everybody shouted no.
Yeah.
And not particularly season 4, but just like the split in general.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's some truth to that because even for season 3 and Polin's love story, it creates this really weird narrative divide in their journey where part 2 is really heavy.
Yeah.
And for part 2, at least in this case, Benedict gets redeemed, but it is a very awkward place to leave off their story.
Yeah, I just find it so unnecessary. Like, I get that they're like trying to build up the stuff and keep the momentum going, whatever, but in season 3, that was like a nice place to like have that divide. It made more sense. The split between Benedict's and Sophie's made like no sense at all, because I wasn't like waiting on tender hooks to be like, oh, is she going to say yes or no to being his mistress? You know, like that wasn't.
Well, because she already kind of has said no by walking away from him.
Yeah.
And she was kind of icked out by it as well.
Yeah.
Our listener, Nick, said, I still don't like the whole show being split on 2. Unfortunately, I can't see Netflix allowing this to change. And I'm worried the writers will need to shoehorn in cliffhangers for each episode 4 going forwards.
Probably.
And that is a concern because we've said this before, but the Polin cliffhanger wasn't written that way. They didn't write the season to be split.
Yeah.
So there was a very natural split. However, this was a manufactured break. And it's like, I don't know if the staircase was expected to go viral and maybe that was like the momentum to carry the show for a month. But it's like,
maybe
when you leave them in a bad place, it's a bit of a weird month to like still be super invested in the story as a casual viewer.
Yeah.
But back to episode 5, that's kind of the lay of the land where we're picking up from. And I think the reason I struggle with, we were talking right at the top about the Benophie story, and Lecky, I think you specifically said you're more connected with the Benophie story after episode 7, or after episode 6, sorry. And like a lot of this episode is Sophie asking him to leave her alone.
Yeah.
And him refusing to.
Yeah.
And also there's a power dynamic there.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm so frustrated with Ben in this episode, because I'm like, she's asking you to just leave her alone. Why can't you?
Yeah, I agree. And not to skip too far ahead, I think he has that frustratingly for a very long time. I kind of hoped that the redemption would come like quicker and then you deal with sort of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But he's still, after they've shagged, he's still like smirking away. He doesn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation.
Yeah.
And that really made me struggle. But yeah, this episode is super obvious.
And he's always making decisions for them both, isn't he?
Yes.
Even in like the Our Cottage bit.
Yeah.
It's like, ask a girl, you know?
Yeah.
He's very presumptuous, and I feel like when you really start to connect to Benedict as a romantic lead and feel like he's earned Sophie is like that scene in his study after John's death when he like angrily tosses the papers off his desk and she comes in and like they have a moment where they nearly kiss. Sophie kind of pulls away, but he lets her. He realizes there's no hope there. It's kind of like when he's given up and he's no longer pursuing her despite her saying this could never work, you kind of realize, yes, he's going to let her go because he thinks that's better for her. That's when you're like, yes, I believe you as the romantic lead of the season.
Yeah.
Although someone who was all on team Ben having a mistress was Alfie, of all bloody people.
Yes, that was hilarious.
I was so surprised.
We talked about how he was like the person who is pushing Sophie to dream and pursue her fantasies. I didn't realize, I guess I never thought that he would be pushing her to be a mistress.
He was like, go get some girl.
I think that Alfie is very aware of where he is in life and where Sophie is in life. And like he realizes the reality of her situation. Because for him, like as far as he knows, you know, she's stuck here. There is no out from being like a maid or a woman of the working class. And so he was like, yeah, fucking do it and reap the benefits from it. You know, like get your money, get your bag, whatever.
I also like that he said that he would have taken the offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From Benedict.
We'll have a nice casually announcing you're gay in the 19th century.
Yeah.
What a great guy.
Yeah.
Well, things are looking a bit better for Ben. He sends her that letter where he's like, I await your answer. Can we meet? And then he slightly harasses her in the street again, where again, she's like, please leave me alone. And he's like, I'm going to linger to my heart's content.
Take the hint.
I thought that was really interesting too because it kind of shows that Benedict is still ignorant of the fact that they live in two separate worlds.
Yeah.
Because he sends her the letter with his family's mail. According to Footman John, he's like, oh, this accidentally got caught up in the family's mail. He doesn't even realize that the staff receive mail differently.
Yeah.
His poor butler gets marched around everywhere, doesn't he?
Yes.
He's like, go get Sophie. And that's the thing. It's like, go tell Sophie to go meet me here.
Go fetch her.
It's like, excuse me.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes people of privilege don't even like understand that they live in a point of privilege, you know, especially if they were born into it and raised in it. And I think the same thing goes for Benedict, is Benedict benefits from being the second son because like people don't look so hard. And so it's like, oh, well, he can just do whatever he wants because he can, you know, like he can be an artist. He can do all these things. He just doesn't understand working to protect himself and like being a woman in society of the working class and all this other stuff. So it's just, I mean, he needs to figure it out.
And that's the conversation Violet has to have with him in like episode 7 when she's very genuinely like, I'll support you, but there are very real consequences. And she says like, you've lived a very privileged life. Can you actually go without the trappings of wealth that you're so accustomed to?
Right.
Like it will be a complete life change for you. And this is what Sophie is saying throughout this episode and the next episode, especially like after they've slept together, when she's like, you're all right telling me that you want to be with me and everything, but there are consequences and I will be the one to suffer if it goes wrong. So it's an interesting direction that this episode goes with them. Obviously there's the scene as well where she finds his collections of drawings of the Lady in Silver and then she tells him off in the study, which again is where she's like, it's so disrespectful to ask me to be your mistress. Like, I would rather be a maid. That's what you don't understand. I would rather be a maid than be your mistress.
Because it's respectable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have respect.
And I do really like her standing up to him. But then later on, of course, he confesses his love and the two sleep together. So the whole Benophie arc in this episode, how did you feel? Did you buy the way that Sophie kind of caves into him at the end and has that moment of weakness? Do you think Benedict really feels remorseful to what he did in the previous episode?
I do buy Sophie giving into him, but just purely for one reason, because her whole life she's wanted to be loved and craved love, and a man is standing in front of her telling her that he loves her. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's why she went to the masquerade, because she wanted one night. She was very aware that that wasn't like a lifetime that she was signing up for. It was like one night of weakness that she'll do, and then she'll look back into reality, which is kind of how she viewed the end of episode 5, isn't it? Like, I will allow myself this one night and I'll wake up the next morning and I'll go and clean the linens or whatever. I liked that Sophie really hit him hard in this episode because he deserved it. But yeah, it's not my favourite Benophie episode. No. I do like this episode for other plot points, which we'll come to in a second. But one twist, I guess, in the Benophie story this episode is that Violet like completely catches on to what's going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone knows about the Aylesbury owls. And as soon as Sophie's like, what fucking owls? She's like, there is something amiss. And Violet just really focuses on this being an issue. And she pieces the story together about Ben and Sophie, which I think was a really interesting, it's not really twist, but like an interesting direction to go in for Violet to become like really preoccupied with figuring out who Sophie was.
Yeah.
Does that feel like realistic that she would care that much about a servant?
Yeah, because she's clinging to the hope that there is something about Sophie that is suitable enough that she could be with Benedict and that it will be a non-issue because she does love love. She doesn't want to be in the way of a potential love story, even though later on she says like, oh, I kind of hoped it was just like a dalliance or something like that. I feel like she realizes there's interest here. She's for love. She's trying to see, is there any way this could potentially work? Because otherwise this is maybe not so great a situation.
Yeah. You'd have expected us to like hit the roof and be like, what the fuck are you doing? But I suppose because she liked Sophie and she saw Sophie as like a sensible person, she was a bit more swayed. But lucky there was one interesting moment though in Violet's searching that tipped our hats to a different character perhaps.
So when Violet is trying to dig into Sophie's backstory a little bit, she has this conversation with Mrs. Wilson where she suggests that Sophie might not be as like lowborn as she claims, saying sometimes governesses turn out to be runaway daughters of nobility. And I thought this was maybe possible foreshadowing for Eloise's season, if not the governess bit, which isn't actually in her story, but the bit about a runaway daughter of nobility, which we know in Eloise's book is something that she does.
Yeah.
I can imagine her running away and pretending to be a governess.
Yeah.
Yeah, she could.
I can imagine them playing with it that way.
Violet, for all her wins, has only kind of been increasingly worse to Eloise, I'd say, across the season.
I know.
So maybe that is a setup for a bit of a runaway.
Yeah.
Violet was interesting the whole of season 4, wasn't she? She had such a big role and she really swung between like antagonist and then shipper. It was the whole complicated thing. But yeah, Elle really got the rough stick with her. Well, let's catch up with some of our other characters then. I think the real big subplot for part 2, and at points you could even call it the main story in some ways, was the Fran, John, Michaela situation.
Yeah.
And the three of them really go on this journey in this episode, which obviously follows Michaela's unwelcome to return to the ton at the end of the last episode. And it begins with the scene of John and Michaela staying up until 4 a.m, which upsets Fran because it's knocked her routine out of sorts. And John starts this episode, because he's caught in the middle, isn't he, between two people he really loves. And he starts the episode really trying to like balance or like prioritize Fran as his wife and being like, okay, yeah, what do you need in this moment? I'll support you. I'll compromise towards you. What I think was interesting in this episode is that he doesn't swing the other way, but he makes sure that he stands up for Michaela in the moments that he needs to stand up for her. And it's not just like, Fran's my wife, I'll support you no matter what. Yeah. He really challenges Fran throughout the episode. And sorry, my dog has a squeaky toy. And I thought that was a really compelling way to portray the bonds between the different characters.
Yeah. I will say that the Fran and Frankela relationships in part 2, I was really moved by. I was really worried how they were going to handle Frankela, but they handled it with such subtlety. I kind of wish we had more of this even in season 3 because we didn't really like the way they introduced the Frankela love story. It seemed like a little bit over the top Fran's reaction to Michaela, but we have later in part 2, like Fran reaches for Michaela's hand and you could tell by the way Michaela pulls her hand away that she's really affected by it. And I believe Masali did an interview recently where she talked about how Michaela has been in love with Fran since they first met, but you don't really see that until like part 2.
We just got chills.
I kind of wish we had seen the reverse. So instead of seeing Fran reacting to Michaela in season 3, that we'd seen Michaela reacting, because like that little moment in part 2, I just loved it. And I really like that they spent this time setting up this really genuine friendship between them after having them kind of like butt heads and seeing Fran being really awkward with Michaela, especially knowing like John had such limited time left on this earth. You really didn't want to see all that tension.
Yeah.
And I just really loved how they played it and showed that these are two people who are so important to Fran.
Yeah.
And like kind of set up the transition from her relationship with John to her future with Michaela. I felt like it was actually really beautiful and really moving, and I'm really happy with how it played out.
That was lovely.
Well, our listener Pink Bunny said, how did you feel about how Frankela was handled? Because I know Lecky had concerns about the emotional cheating aspect, but I was relieved it didn't seem to take that route. And I agree, like, we didn't think Fran would like emotionally cheat from like a character perspective, but the show does have a tendency to sometimes prioritize drama over like the more truthful moments.
Yeah.
And so I was also fearing like this could get really messy, and it could put Frankela in like a really precarious position if it looks like they're being duplicitous somehow. But instead you had this like really beautiful, organic, moving exploration of a new relationship where their family, their friends, they had this really unique bond that gets challenged in different ways. And they had these moments to confess why they feel certain ways. And it was so satisfying to, I think I described it on Patreon as like, when we look back at season 1 Polin, where they're like tentatively stepping towards their love story in these tiny little moments. And like now we look back and we're like, oh my gosh, look at the very beginnings. When you watch these Frankela moments in the future, you'll be like, look at these tiny little sparks that we know will like burst into this beautiful flame.
Yeah, it did feel like that.
So I love the way that Frankela was handled.
Yeah.
Veg, how did you feel about the whole Frankela of it all?
Definitely agree. I was similarly concerned at the end of season 3 with not just what happened, because it wasn't too bad. You had the look from Francesca during her wedding, and you had the look that she gave Michaela. It wasn't that big a deal, but it did give an already sort of on the rocks potential relationship due to the people who've got a really good connection with Michael's story, and due to the people who maybe haven't seen a lot of same-sex relationships in media that they could kind of get their heads around yet.
Yeah.
It was a bit dodgy, and I was worried, but I think like you said, it was really handled well. And I think particularly as it looks like we're going to have a year of a break, presumably, or a season's break before that story takes off, I kind of feel more confident about like what the reaction will be to the story, which shouldn't be important, but it is. And a lot of people do need something that is well written and a good representation to get their heads around it not being Michael. So I definitely have more hope now. And they're both really hot.
To piggyback off of that, I have 2 thoughts. I think this season did really well at showing just how much Francesca did love John, even in a romantic way, especially with how she mourned him. Like, I'm going to cry thinking about it, but my hormones are out of whack. But just like the way that she expressed her love towards him at the funeral and everything, I just think that like looking back on it, because I've been watching Francela edits and then Fran edits, I feel like looking back on it, yes, there was a spark there, but it seems as if Francesca was almost intimidated by Michaela's presence, because Michaela seems so sure of herself when she is introduced to them. And there might be attraction there, but Francesca doesn't know how to identify it yet. And number 2, I'm excited for them. This is just a little tangent, because oftentimes lesbian stories are so depressing. And like Bridgerton makes a commitment to having happy stories being told, so it's nice that lesbians will get my window's cracked and someone just walked past as I screamed lesbian.
Lesbians!
Get their happy ending.
We'll get a happy ending. Yes.
Listeners, look up Bury Your Gays if you don't already know about it.
One of my only criticisms regarding this storyline, I guess, in season 4 is that in light of John's death, I kind of wish that they hadn't done the pinnacle subplot in part 1.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost treated as like a comedic relief.
Yeah, like a joke.
She goes to other people for advice, like, what's an orgasm? What's a pinnacle? How do I achieve it? And like, while I feel like that's actually really interesting because it sets up her future realization that she actually is a lesbian, taking like a comedic approach to Fran's relationship when we know he's going to die in part 2.
Yeah.
I didn't really like that. And I almost wish like we had kept more focus on their marriage between the two of them, having discussions about why they haven't had a child yet, especially because that becomes such a big issue in part 2. And Fran feels like she's like failed John. So I feel like having more focus on their desire to have a family in part 1 would have been more meaningful than this kind of comedic subplot of her trying to figure out if her inability to orgasm was tied into that.
Yeah.
But that's my only minor criticism, I think, for their journey in season 4.
Yeah, I agree. Part 2 resonated a lot more
Yes.
than part 1 did.
Like you're talking about sort of the fact that John doesn't have much time and everything. I was a bit worried in this episode because obviously as it unfolds, they have that soiree at Fran's house and then Fran is pushing Michaela towards Lord Taylor. Oh, that rhymes. And there's like this conflict brewing between all the characters. And at a point I was like, oh my God, John is going to spend the last few days of his life like caught in conflict with Fran. And you did have that moment where he becomes frustrated with Francesca and very calmly, but he confronts her about it. And I think there's this really lovely, important thread throughout part 2 where it's subtly shown that John knows about Michaela's sexuality and he not only supports her, but is very protective towards his cousin. And I think Victor Masali did a beautiful job in showing that.
Definitely.
Because you really need to establish the depth of their relationship as characters. But I'm so glad the way that they allowed that conflict to happen between Fran and John. But then in episode 5, you have a really moving resolution between Francesca and Michaela where Fran goes off to make it right. And they have this awkward, but they have like a breakthrough as well in a conversation where what Francesca is rattled by is she is feeling unsure of herself for many reasons, including the fact that she isn't having a child and she's new to marriage and everything. And Michaela comes in and I think she describes her as like her chaos that she brings with it, and she envies that chaos. So I think the little bond that they have in episode 5 is like a really special breakthrough that I think really works for their story. It lays the ground without being too heavy-handed.
Like a really great little glimpse of what their future relationship will be like, because Michaela kind of challenges Fran and doesn't shy away from showing that she's upset with Fran about what she did as well. And then I really liked Michaela teasing Fran about her numerically organized puzzle collection as well. It's just really cute.
Yeah, so really love the Francella story overall, and episode 5 was a really interesting way to get the bond going between the two of them and to establish where they are before John dies. But let's see how the rest of our characters do in this episode. We'll start with our favourites. Obviously, Polin. Pen has an interesting storyline in episode 5 where she has written something. She's written a little bit too much about Mr. Hiscox's mistress, and Portia's loving that. What a scene to start with. And then what happens is we had spoilers for this. I will admit we had spoilers. And when we read the spoilers for this, I think we were all a bit like, why does Pen just have to suffer sometimes? Like Pen's story.
I don't think that's what I said. I said, why does Penelope have to be written like ruining another innocent woman's life again? Like never beating those allegations.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it just went off in this sudden direction where Pen was suddenly held accountable for this one particular piece of gossip. And then Pen was like, fine, fuck it, I'm done with this whole thing. Which is maybe not what we wanted.
It was abrupt.
If she was going to give it up, we didn't want it to be like she was browbeaten or like she was like morally compelled into doing it. But whatever, she decides to retire and she goes to the Queen and the Queen tells her no. It's interesting, Pen's reasoning for quitting, because she's like, there's been a whole change since I've come out in public. I have too much power. I'm a Bridgerton. There's an imbalance. This is when she reveals that she wants to pursue other writing, but she's knocked back by the Queen, who's like, no. Why does everyone keep asking me these questions? I don't know. What do you think about Pen in episode 5?
I actually liked the speech she gave, and I wasn't really sold on the idea. I was worried about her being kind of like forced into retiring just because being Lady Whistledown became like too hard for her. But I feel like this speech really made me want her to set down her pen and pursue becoming a novelist. And I really liked how she was like, I'm a Bridgerton now. And like you kind of see that in that later scene where she's staring into her mirror and she sees the young Penelope and like the Polin theme is playing and you realize that she's found fulfillment in so many other areas of her life that she doesn't really need Lady Whistledown anymore. She has the man of her dreams. She has this love story. So I was okay with it.
She was like, too much fucking hassle. I'll go write something else. I have a lot to say about Pen's storyline, but I think we'll come back to it a little bit later.
I also like that as Queen Charlotte leaves the room, she says that she'd like to retire, kind of a reference to the Lady Whistledown and the Lady Danbury situations, as well as her leaving the room.
Let's go see how Colin is doing. He's having a much better time this episode because we have what is probably the best scene in the entire season.
Agreed.
Lecky, where are we?
The cheese scene. Benedict comes over to the Featherington house. He's been like day drinking and he wants to see if Colin wants to go drinking with him. But he instead finds Colin and the Featherington boys in the midst of their monthly like dining club.
What a monthly dining club. There you go.
They're eating a bunch of imported cheeses. One of the best scenes they've ever had in Bridgerton. I hope they keep the Featherington men around for seasons to come. It's just great.
I adored this scene. It was like my favourite. I think I said at the time, like, I just want to live in this scene forever. Like the little happiness, like the little green flags of men. Our listener Nick said the Colin scene with Finch and Danquith was incredible. Purple Cat said it was perfect. My absolute favourite. Danquith and Finch icons. I love them. Your Honour. My favourite part about the scene is Benedict and Colin's silent communication through looks and facial expressions. Colin knows his brother-in-laws are a little ridiculous, but he obviously enjoys their company and they are good men. Absolute green flags. I'm so happy Colin chooses to surround himself with them and John, maybe not in the long term, and Will.
I really love how Dankworth and Finch are wearing like pops of like lilac and purple to show how in love they are, to reinforce why Greg went to them for love advice and not his less successful brother Benedict. It's really cute.
Well, our listener G said, I get quite emotional at Gregory having such green flag role models for him with Colin and the Featherington brother-in-laws. What a difference compared to Colin, who had Anthony and Benedict.
Oh, God. Yeah, it's a wonder he turned out kind of nice.
It's true. Like, it honestly is. It's a miracle. Whereas now you've got Greg, who is taken so seriously by these men and like regarded as a grown-up, because Anthony Benedict would have just spent the whole of Colin's childhood just being like, oh, you're just a kid, and it really had an impact. So it's so nice that Greg has like these good lovesick men.
This is maybe a better place to mention it just really quickly, but later at the recital when Greg admits that he's basically fallen in love, and Colin like grins. Cute. He's so happy that he's achieved this, like helping Greg find love because he loves love so much. I just loved this whole journey of matchmaker Colin helping Gregory this episode.
Loved it. Veg, what are you thinking? Am I right in saying you don't like cheese?
It's true, yeah.
How did this emotionally hit you then? Was it difficult to watch? I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. We can skip it if you want.
Thank you for understanding, and it's really good to have your support here.
Always.
Yeah, but no, it was good. It's lovely that they're treating Gregory like a real person, because Colin wasn't, like with Marina, is the best example. But yeah.
It's like, is it any wonder he got into that situation? Because he was like trying to prove himself to his brothers and to his family, because he was never taken seriously. So it's like, if you take someone seriously from a young child, then they won't go off and, you know, rebel in that way. I have to come back to the cheeses though, because Gabby has asked an important question. My first thought in episode 5 when I saw all the cheeses was, there's no proper refrigeration. Beans, as someone who's made cheese, how did you feel about the cheese on display?
Well, here's the thing. So some cheeses actually need to be at room temperature to be eaten and get their true flavor profile. So if they're eating any blue cheeses, any bries, that creaminess needs to like get on full display. So it's fine. You know, I think they're having a very decent cheese party.
Having a great cheese party.
I screamed when that scene came on.
And this is like a real strength of season 4. It's like there are family moments that in season 3, there were these gaping voids. I was like, where the hell are all these family moments?
Right.
I don't know. The show's at its best when it does things like that. And it can have plot relevance. I think this is the breakthrough. It's like you can have a funny, kooky little side story of the boys with their dining club, but then Benedict can enter the scene and learn something in the scene.
Exactly, yeah.
Lecky, you had a very troubling realization though, didn't you, in this scene? You were very upset. You had a question.
Yes, a new character was named, and I was very disappointed that his name was Barnes and not Dunwoody from the books.
Aww.
Honestly, I was like, where's my boy Dunwoody? But we will see Ray later on, won't we? Yeah, I love this scene so much. Colin's lines were really cute. He was like, you must be brave. Do what our oldest brother told me to do with Penelope. You tell her your own feelings. I know there's nothing more terrifying, but well, once you have met that young lady who is meant for you. What does he mean? But once you have met that young lady, it took you 20 fucking years, didn't it? So I don't understand where he's got that from. Who challenges you, sees you as you are. You cannot let any amount of fear stop you from letting your heart speak.
Sees you as you are.
Very so fucking cute. Mm-hmm. But some have wondered why Colin is crediting his eldest brother with the love advice. But I think it makes sense.
I had that question. Why? Why is he crediting Anthony? I feel like Violet is the one who gave him the push last season. Why is Anthony getting name dropped here?
Who is Greg most likely to follow in that moment? If he's like, do what our mum tells you to do, or it's like, do what your cool older brother who you've always looked up to as a kid told me to do. Mm-hmm. I think it's just like a men thing.
Well, he didn't have to name anybody. He didn't have to say, Mom gave me this advice.
Well, he's talking about the scene where Anthony had a drink with Colin and Ben, and he was like, have you said all of this to her? And Colin's like, oh, no. And then they go and sleep together. So maybe he's saying that Anthony's responsible for the Featherington dynasty, is what I think has been said here.
Okay.
Okay, elsewhere, though, war is still waging. We have that Elle and Hyacinth conflict in episode 5.
Well, first of all, Violet is really rudely, throughout part 2, telling Eloise that she's going to go back on the marriage mart because she's no longer doing, the finishing lessons with Hyacinth anymore. Mm-hmm. And Violet's being really rude about it, to be honest. Yeah. No wonder that she ends up running away, potentially, in her season.
I wonder if that's going to be a story point, because, for a start, she learned nothing in season 2, did she? Clearly.
No.
Maybe she is most like Benedict, Violet, after all.
I don't believe it.
Because they keep trying to force people to do things they're literally saying they don't want to do. Because how many times does Elle have to be like, it makes me feel uncomfortable, I don't want to do it? And her mum's like, get out there anyway.
Yeah.
Why are we not respecting people?
Mm-hmm. I will also say possible foreshadowing for Eloise this season. She's out with Sophie and Francesca, and Benedict convinces her to buy the feather for Hyacinth as a kind of apology gift. And the feather is very similar to the one on the cover of To Sir Philip with Love, the book cover.
She's got a hand on the cover. There's a feather sticking out of it.
Mm-hmm. And then later in episode 8, you see her holding it again. So I feel like they're heavily foreshadowing Eloise throughout part 2, no matter what they said.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will get to season 5 foreshadowing, fear not. What else is kicking off in episode 5? Obviously, Alice becomes the lady in waiting.
Oh, God.
That went better than I thought it was going to go,
I was surprised how quickly that was resolved because she was waffling in part 1, oh, I don't know if I want to be a lady in waiting. And then all of a sudden she's Harriet the spy, conflicted about whether or not she wants to be the spy. And then ends up being the savior of the Benophie plot at the end of the season.
Very strange.
Yeah.
I guess I like that they were utilizing Alice more. I don't know if I quite got their choice to have her be so important to the plot.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe they were trying to really make sure that the subplots were connected to the main plot.
Yeah.
And this one just felt a little forced to me. But I will say that she looked really great in her lady-in-waiting uniform.
She did. That is one beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you skip forward to Hyacinth's recital,
yeah,
Alice follows... Who does she follow? She follows Violet and Benedict and Sophie. Is that right? And she overhears everything.
Well, she's going upstairs to look for Nikki, and then she ends up overhearing Benedict and Sophie, and you and Beans and I were laughing the entire time, wondering if she had her ear pressed to the door during Benophie's lovemaking scene. And I said the next morning, I wondered if Sophie stumbled over her outside the door as she was leaving the next day. That was a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, we thought that she was going to sell them out to the Queen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had this oh my God, this massive twist is going to happen. And then nothing happened until episode 8, when she just kind of swooped in as the savior.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great, but it was, I don't know, an interesting moment. But I'm glad she looks great in white, and I'm glad she had a great time. The recital was the last big set piece of the episode, wasn't it, really? And I love this so much. It was absolutely adorable.
My first thought was, I wonder if Penn and Colin did one of these when they were young, when they were getting ready to go on the marriage mart.
They must have done.
And if so, how cute would that have been?
AO3, go forth, do your work. It was very, very cute. Obviously, Gregory had his little crush, little Miss Rochelle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So sweet.
I really love how Footman John smiles when Hyacinth walks in as well, because he just loves her.
Princess, hi.
Also, if you notice during Birds of a Feather when the camera pans to Sophie, I think it's along the same time as the lyrics, I'll love you till the day that I die, and she's watching Benedict.
Aww.
I thought that was a cute little moment.
Aww.
Oh, and I also love how Marcus, he's the one who notices that moment.
Oh, don't mention him.
You can still love Marcus because he's a man who also really appreciates love, and it looks like he catches on to like Sophie's feelings for Benedict because she's just kind of openly admiring him at that moment at the recital. Mm-hmm. He clocks it.
Yeah, Victoria's here that agreed with you about the whole setup of the recital. They said, I found myself repeatedly pondering Hyacinth's practice ball, which I adored. My question is, do you think Daphne also had practice balls that Colin attended? Is that where he flirted with half the girls in London? Were Pen and Eloise there too?
Yes.
How I would have loved to seen this in a flashback. How we would love to see a lot of things in a flashback, eh?
Right. Oh my gosh.
We just have had a lot of people say like, oh, Polin didn't need flashbacks, etc., etc. And while we didn't necessarily need to see baby Polin meet for the first time because we hear Colin recounting that story, that doesn't mean they couldn't have shown us other moments from their past that kind of gave us more insight into their relationship. And like seeing this practice ball made me think, wow, that would have been like a really cute flashback. You know, for example, just these moments, like snapshots of their former lives and their relationship together. But alas.
Well, I think Victoria was suggesting that all is not lost because we're forgetting a little person called Eloise who will have a season at some point. We could have an Eloise flashback. I think it's more likely we're going to get Philip flashbacks, though, if we're being honest, for their season.
Yeah, I think so, too, because he's got a lot of trauma and...
Beans, do you know Philip's backstory?
No.
Well, he's got a lot of trauma.
He's got a lot of trauma.
Like he's just spoilt it for you.
Oh.
He's like Sophie. You know, he comes with his own baggage and you feel sorry for him, basically.
Sophie does not come with her own baggage. That was literally the whole fucking problem in part 1, Lecky.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
She did not come with her own baggage.
Yeah, right.
No.
Anyway, talking of Sophie, there's all sorts of shenanigans in episode 5, but there is a little tease of a new employer, the new Lady Penwood, who Alfie hopes is less of a she-devil than Araminta. We will see. We will see.
That is a really, really clever callback, I think, to season 3, because they have people refer to Cressida numerous times as a devil. She's literally called a devil at the Mondrich ball. And then earlier in 306, I think Cho calls her Hellborn, etc. And then we even have Penelope as Lady Whistledown saying that she's like worse than the devil when she's trying to first pen her issue for Lady Whistledown. So I thought that was a really clever way to tease that the new Lady Penwood is Cressida.
Oh, I love Cressida. We'll get to her, of course. So for the most part, that was episode 5. Obviously, a lot more went on. I really loved the family scenes in episode 5. The Benophie storyline was a little bit, great that they slept together, I suppose, but we'll see how that works out for them in the next episode, because it leads straight into episode 6, The Passing Winter. When they wake up the next day, reality floods back in, and we have the aftermath of sleeping together.
Like I said, I'm curious if Alice was outside that door when Sophie exited.
Oh, yeah.
She probably wasn't. I thought this episode opened in a really grim way, like the grim reality of her like tracking her periods and stuff, and kind of reinforced like what a big deal this is to Sophie, and in this world that the idea that she could become pregnant was really dark. And it made the whole episode a little bit bleak, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think this is my least favourite episode of part 2.
I disagree with you.
What's your least favourite?
Oh, you're going to hate me. It was probably...
Don't say episode 7, get in the bin.
I'll say maybe episode 8. But I was speaking with Veg before we all got on the call a little bit, because I feel like the emotion at the end of episode 6 was, between Fran at the ball, at Cressida's ball, was more impactful for me than the death scene itself, her discovering his body, because, well, for many reasons, we'll get there. But I really loved episode 6, so it's not my least favorite.
I think you're right. I think the Benophie story in episode 6 was what was a bit of a bummer for me, because, like, there's romance, and then there's, like, having a romantic encounter, and then having to watch poor Sophie for weeks on end, having to just worry about, like, what her future is going to look like now, while Ben is there, like, oh, let's invest in some more copper mines and stuff. And it's like, oh my God, like, read the fucking room.
Yeah, making plans without consulting her.
And he's, like, busy prepping for, like, My Cottage without consulting her. It's, I don't know.
Ooh, a camera shot I liked, though, at the very beginning of this episode. You see Sophie, like, darning or mending some dresses in the Bridgerton house, and the camera pans above her, and there's, like, some lace hanging from the ceiling, and it almost looks like a veil passing over her face. And I wondered if that was foreshadowing for her wedding, even though she's kind of fighting against it now. But
oh, very cute. I'll have to go watch that. So let's see how everyone else is doing throughout the episode. Pen goes to Lady Danbury for advice on how to handle the Queen, because Lady Danbury is the Queen Whisperer. I don't want to talk about the Pen storyline just yet. Spoiler alert, guys, it's like one of my least favourite storylines in the whole season. Like, I think it was so underwhelmingly done, unfortunately, which is like a real shame because obviously Pen is my girl and I love her and I love Whistledown. And I just think this is a part in the story where there could have been like a real build-up of conflict. Like, oh my God, Pen wants to quit. The Queen doesn't want her to quit. She's gone to Lady Danbury for advice. And like Lady Danbury is even saying that, you know, she's in a similar predicament. She's also sort of caught up in this. And so throughout this episode, you have like this potential of conflict and potential of character development building. And then it just doesn't really go anywhere, which I find really frustrating.
I did think there was at least some clever setup here because when Penelope is talking with Lady Danbury says there won't be any new chapters in their lives. Basically, they won't be freed from Queen Charlotte. Queen Charlotte won't let them go unless Queen Charlotte guides Penelope. And I feel like that was foreshadowing of the Queen being in on the publishing of the retirement issue, like knowing in advance that was going to happen.
Well, something more cheerful is that Cantony are back on our screens. Kate, less frequently so, but very, very glad to see her. First of all, what a cute baby that was.
But the baby looks even younger than the Polin baby, right? I'm so confused by this.
Oh my God, the fucking timeline. Veg, how do you feel? Anthony's back and bearded and with a baby.
Yeah, big fan. Cute baby, cute man, cute woman. Big fan.
And it is the beginning of Cantony being back, but I think one thing the show is not doing very well is it doesn't really know what to do with its happily married couples.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of baffles me because I think there's so much you could do with them.
Yeah.
And obviously we know there were constraints with filming for Simone and Jonathan Bailey. And it's the same for Polin. We'll come to Polin in a bit where like they don't always know what to do with the married couple. And so they either try to not like bring them in too much or to be like, oh, we could never bring Daphne back because it would be weird to bring Daphne back without Simon, which I don't think is true. And then you just have like Kate kind of popping in and out at very strange moments. And then she's like chucked in the epilogue right at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So my thoughts are like, and I've voiced it before, like on like when we've just been talking outside of the podcast, is that you can have a happy, blissful marriage and still have points of conflict within your marriage or within your society. Like, we could totally go off on a tangent where Daphne, like, in a future season is, like, trying to become friends with someone, and she's like, I'm having a fucking hard time being friends with these people because, like, you know, it's a repeat of season 1, but, like, something similar. Because I feel like there are side stories in Bridgerton that you could have absolutely just swapped out one of the Bridgertons or someone in the family as a way to tie together. I think they think like, oh, once they have a happy ending, nobody ever fights, no one ever argues, yada, yada, yada. You could be perfectly happy in your marriage and still have a conflict that you guys have to talk. I think it would be very beneficial for them to show happy, communicative marriages that still have moments where it's like, yeah, I'm annoyed with you right now. Doesn't mean I don't love you, you know?
But that's also like the core of Cantony.
Yeah.
Having conflict that isn't, you know, life-ruining stakes. Their whole thing is enemies to lovers, and they always have like that banter playfulness that they seem to shy away from because they're like, if we showed them like arguing with each other, it'll look like we're breaking them. It's like, no, it's just them being true to their characters, isn't it?
Yes. It washes them out, you know? They lose their personality.
Yeah. Lecky, how'd you feel?
Well, this isn't about Cantony, but I had the same frustration with Polin and especially Colin this season, where Colin gets maybe a handful of lines and most of them are saying like, I'm proud of you, my love, you've done it.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not, he does
all delivered to perfection.
You know, well, he does these really great, you know, the cheese scene is great, the love advice is great, but we know he has so much depth to his character and like, you just wish they would do a little bit more with him and like not forget that he's also supposed to be a writer. I don't know, I hope they maybe explore that a little bit next season. I went off on a little rant to you guys the other day where I was like, maybe it'd be really interesting if they were like exploring Penelope and Colin as novelists, as writers next season, but nobody wants to publish their novels now that they don't have the notoriety of Lady Whistledown behind them. Like, you can have these interesting like storylines where they don't even necessarily have to be in conflict with each other, but they have something to do beyond just being in love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, we were talking about this earlier, too. Penelope having a conversation with Colin before retiring Lady Whistledown, especially because it was such a big drama in their relationship last season. You feel like he would at least be able to weigh in and offer his support in some way.
I mentioned this when we were watching it. I said, it would have been so nice if we had a moment where someone like approached Colin at a ball or whatever and was like, I read your travel stories. They were so good. Like, I used it when I was in fucking Greece or France or wherever the fuck. You know, like that would have been interesting. Or it could have been this like movement for Penn and Colin to be like, we want to write something maybe together about like parenthood or life in the ton or like, you know, something like that. They take so much time making these characters into people, making them complex and making them interesting, and then they're nothing after their season. And they don't have to take up a huge storyline, but it's like you can still give them depth.
Both Anthony and Colin can be more than wife guys.
Yes.
And at least Anthony, to be fair, this season was an antagonist.
Oh, yeah.
But I would have liked to have seen more of Colin.
Yeah.
My last thing on the Kate issue is, okay, fair enough. Let's say you only have these actors from a production standpoint. You have these actors for this amount of time. That's your lot. I just think the way that they're included needs to be a little bit more like natural, because just disappearing characters halfway through an episode at like crucial points is really strange. Like writing Kate to not immediately go with them is a bit odd. And then obviously they don't go to the fucking funeral. And it's like, they sent flowers.
I would rather have them go to the funeral than have any of the other family moments with Cantony. As much as I like Kate sticking up for Cressida in that one scene and stuff, I would rather have them at the funeral, which I can only imagine they missed because they have like norovirus or something.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why else they're not there.
You better have a good fucking excuse.
How profound would it have been if Benedict had that huge scene where he's yelling at, what the hell is his name?
Anthony?
No.
Oh, Dundas. Dundas? Yeah.
And then Anthony comes in and he's like, what's going on? You know, whatever. And he like backs up Benedict and whatever. I don't know. I think they did better at tying Anthony into the conflict of the season than previously. Like, because I feel like Anthony would have had a much bigger reaction to finding out Penelope was Lady Whistledown last year, and we just didn't get it. And so that's the thing, is like, they get these people for what, a day, maybe 2 days, maybe like a week even, and then they have them in like 3 or 4 scenes that are just cameos that to me are pointless. Like, I don't care. Like, I would much rather they be involved in the family drama and like have a legitimate storyline that just makes cohesive sense. Like, they don't have to be there all the time, but it's like they should be there for these moments that aren't just like, oh, I'm going to teach our baby Palm.
Oh,
like,
that was cute. But yeah, I know what you mean.
No, it was cute. I enjoyed it. I'm just saying, like, they could have had that exact same scene in a family scene where they're saying, like, Anthony goes, oh, I'm going to start teaching him Pall Mall. Ha, 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 ha. Benedict, like comes in and he's like, oh, man, I'm in love with Sophie, blah, blah, blah. And then Anthony takes him aside and he's like, what the fuck are you doing? What do you mean?
Also, how long is the journey from like Aubrey Hall to Mayfair?
It's Kent, isn't it? It's not super far.
So you're telling me they couldn't come for the funeral?
Yeah.
I just feel like in the context of the show, in what world are Kate and Anthony missing the funeral of their brother-in-law, their sister's husband?
Right.
I saw an incredible tweet the other day. I'll try and link it. And it says, Daphne has literally missed 4 weddings and a funeral. And this is the thing, right? It's like, okay, from a production standpoint, you only had these people for these days. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
I think in those situations, the writing has to be stronger for those absent characters, because you can't pretend like Saphne have dropped off the face of the earth.
Right.
And it's like, oh, they've sent flowers. And you're there like, what the fuck is going on? Like, if you don't have the characters there on hand, can't you at least write them in? Like, you're not telling me that Daphne and Simon wouldn't have anything to have said about Polin last year, or Fron, or Anthony, or like any of these people. And so like the writing can just easily just drop in a few crumbs to explain where people are and to like remind us that those people exist.
Right.
Yeah, that's a frustration.
I mean, and it did that this year. Like, I feel like there were some sort of seamless transitions.
Only when it fucking served Violet, right? I'll tell you now.
Well, but when Hyacinth was like, Archie and whomever, you know, all these, but it made sense. It made sense.
Those were hilarious. That, and then, no, because then in episode 8, they name drop the Duke of Hastings, and we were like, the Duke of what now?
That's true.
How convenient of you. It's like, do you know when someone only like name drops you when it's like beneficial to them?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, now you remember he exists, Violet.
True. So it's just like, yeah, obviously, or it could easily have been like, oh, these people fucking wrote all the time. They wrote letters and shit all the goddamn time. So it could have been like, oh, I just had a correspondence with Daphne. She's decided to adopt several ducks. They love duck eggs. Or some shit like that. Like,
ducks need a lot of care, to be honest.
Yeah. Like, it could have been something like so simple. And it's just like, I feel as if, here was the thing. I think they found it wasn't incredibly executed. I definitely felt there was more to be desired. But Penelope, for instance, was kind of given this storyline on the side outside of her marriage. And I mean, it's because it's natural. She had Lady Whistledown, whatever. Mm-hmm. You can do that for everyone else. You can allow these like subplots for everyone else. I mean, how nice would it be if like Penelope were able to like, I don't know, talk to Daphne about it, be like, I'm confused about what I should do. And then Daphne gives, let's say she's still fucking raising these ducks and she gives her advice with like a duck analogy, like just something like that. Or like, it'd be nice if Colin and Penelope went and visited Daphne to see her ducks.
The pig competition.
like had dinner with, because they don't even visit these people.
Daphne couldn't miss the pig competition.
Yeah.
That's why they didn't make it to the funeral.
Right, she's the official judge. But it's just like, they don't even visit Daphne or Simon, or like, why isn't, I don't know, Benedict being like, I'm gonna go fuck off to India for a little bit too. And then he comes back with a tan and he's like, I'm gonna culturally appropriate something because, I'm an artist and that's what fucking artists do.
Beans has been riled.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was so passionate about this.
Obsessed. Beans loved it. Agree.
Well, something else we're all very passionate about is Michaela. So we're just going to sort of rattle through the episode. Episode 6 was very stressful for Michaela because we strongly suspected he was going to die at any second.
Yeah.
And I kept stopping us and being like, 45 minutes left of the episode, 45 minutes of John's, like 23 minutes.
And Beans kept saying like, oh, the wind's going to knock him over at any moment. And then I kept getting worried because he would do this thing at breakfast and then he did it later when he was staring up at the moon, but he starts like staring off into the distance.
Yeah.
And you're like, what's happening? Are you going to die right now? Like, stop it.
You can see death.
Yeah, our flight was boarding and I had like 20 minutes left and I'd told my girlfriend about it and she was like, oh, how's that guy? And I was like, I think he's just about to die. I was like, we've got precious little time with him. I'm like making the most of the moments we have. And like every time we had a scene, like when they had like an argument or he kind of witnessed Francesca and Michaela kind of not getting on, I was like, oh God. And they made up and I was like, he's not going to see them make up. Shonda Rhimes isn't going to let us see them make up. Because I was like, that's such a Shonda Rhimes thing to do. But then he did see the makeup. I was like, oh, great. Everything's going to be okay. And then I was like, wait, no, he's still going to die.
Yeah.
It was like this really stressful thing hanging over the episode. I remember like at the end of the episode, Veg, you were flying. So it was me, Beans and Lecky. We just like lost our minds with stress. I think it was so much worse that we knew it was going to happen because like my heart was racing. I like brought on a headache. Oh, sorry, too soon to say, but like I genuinely like had like a stress headache from like anticipating him dying. So I think it kind of covered the whole episode in like, this blanket of doom. But yeah, I think there were really great moments. Anthony coming back home was a great thing. I think what was really funny is Anthony reverting back to his season 1 self, which Jonathan Bailey had promised us. You could find that kind of frustrating that he comes back and he's like, duty, family.
Yeah.
But I was so annoyed with Benedict at this point that I was like, go fucking get him. And again, Anthony.
You appreciated it.
Yeah.
So like for me, he came in at the right moment. If Anthony had come in like episode 7 and was like, don't you dare marry her, I'd have been like, give it a break. But I really needed this version of Benedict to kind of be slapped around the head a little bit.
Right.
So it was kind of funny how Anthony like dropped in to whack his brother and then went off again. Because you had them going to White's and having like that brother scene, which was really fun, of course. But yeah, Anthony is the real antagonist in this episode, I suppose you could describe him as.
I really like that they also used Anthony to change Sophie's Sophie's mind also, because she almost gives in to Benedict and their future at Our Cottage, and then she overhears Benedict and Antony at their conversation, and then she backs off again. So I really like that Antony was used to kind of color Sophie's perception of what their life together would look like as well.
And I think it made sense as well, because it could have felt like out of character for him to like revert to a previous version. But it wasn't just that he was like angry. He was like, there are actual consequences to the things you're doing. And I'm looking at it from a perspective of being a dad now as well. But I do love the ABC scene at White's, because for a start, just seeing the brothers together is adorable.
Not in order.
Not sat in order once again, but I like that they're having a great time. And Colin is like, I'm going to bumble on over to the bar. And we've all had this scenario in life where like you disappear from something for 2 minutes and you come back and like this massive argument's happened in your absence. And you're like, what the fuck have I missed? And like Antony's got Benedict up against the wall. He's like slamming his head repeatedly over and over again. But it did set up like a really fun conflict for the episode. Well, fun, maybe not the word, but it set up a good conflict for the episode.
Yeah. I mean, Antony's always been a little bit of a rules for thee, not for me type of person. You know what I think was missed? Maybe we can talk more about this later. They didn't really go a lot into Sophie's Korean heritage at all.
I just saw an interview that John Glazer did with InStyle, where he talks about their family had been in England for generations. So they didn't want to touch on that at all in their costuming. They wanted them to be kind of like fully assimilated, I guess. I don't know.
I think he said that they were directed specifically not to include it, which I thought was very strange because...
I don't know. I just feel like they took such great care to talk about Kate's heritage and culture and everything. And then they had Armoretta and Posey and
Araminta.
Araminta.
She's Italian.
And was it Rosamond, I believe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking Cantonese,
Yeah.
you can accept somebody's culture and completely make it normalized in the society that they're living in. It just felt like a missed opportunity. They didn't even have to address it, you know? They could have just
more touches here and there.
Yeah.
Also, she doesn't really have many memories about her mother.
Yeah.
And it would have been really interesting if she shared some memory about her mother, who Benedict will never meet, by recounting some sort of aspect of their Korean heritage.
Right. And even if you live in America or you live in Europe or something like that, you're still connected to your culture in one way, even if you don't necessarily practice everything that's there. And that's for anyone that like comes from a very distinct cultural background. There are stories, songs, whatever that you grew up with.
Food even. Sophie's also very well read, and you're telling me that maybe she wouldn't have read up on like Korean culture or stories after her mom died to kind of like foster that connection, or she could have like made a Korean dish for Benedict while they were at My Cottage, or when they're in the carriage on the way there and they're looking up at the sky, maybe there's a story about a constellation that's like, you know, based on Korean mythology.
Like you're saying that because she spent hours researching Korean mythology.
I did. There are Korean myths related to the stars and stuff. I mean, like there's like so many different, and also food is a great like unifier and way to experience different cultures. That's a way that, you know, she could have connected Benedict to that side of herself.
Yeah. With the necklace thing, what I thought could have been more compelling is rather than having a necklace she wears every day, in Korea, like headdresses and headwear is very big, especially like when you're getting married. And oftentimes there's like this gold like staff that you put in your hair that's like passed to family and given as gifts. And like maybe her mom had something like that, not something you have to address, but you're like, oh, like that's very distinct for this particular culture, and it would make more sense. Because I know like a lot of people are like, we don't want to push our culture and make it out this thing in our identity, but it is.
Yeah. Before we get into Cressida, one thing that I did think they did really well this episode and the last was use dialogue to remind us about Portia and Varley and their connection to each other.
Yes.
Because last episode, we have Araminta like kind of snapping at Varley and saying like, stop bringing up Portia, basically. She obviously can't stop talking about Portia and what it was like working for Lady Featherington. And then Varley is really pissed off when that other housekeeper in the market says that working for Araminta must be a holiday compared to Portia. She kind of like defends her. And then in this episode, Portia says she's uninterested in speaking about Varley, only then to like casually inquire if Penelope has seen Varley around town at all. I like that that they had these little like blink and miss it moments showing that they're missing each other before they reunite at the end.
It's like Polly Walker was criminally underused, I think. I don't know, we could have had more Polly Walker, obviously. But I do love these like lovesick moments. Like, who hasn't done that? Like, I don't give a shit what she's doing, but also, how is she doing? And did she actually? It's like, and I loved it so much. It was just like a really light storyline to sort of pop through at points.
And that's a great use of Polly Walker in general for those little comedic moments.
Yeah, she's so great. I love how Portia just absolutely was dragging Ray through the mud at every single opportunity. She was like, you are nothing, you are pathetic, you are half the woman that Varley was. How dare you stand in her place?
Man, I love seeing Ray.
Also, before Cressida is announced, we find Penelope kind of struggling to pen an issue in her bedroom. And I just have to say that she looks like a gorgeous mermaid in this scene.
I love the character growth. Last season we had sad rainbow fish, and now we've gone
full mermaid.
Pensive mermaid, would you say? One day she'll be happy. But of course, Lecky, as you just alluded to, we had the big reveal. I mean, it was already spoiled, so it wasn't a big reveal, but we had the big reveal of Cressida's return to the Ton, and she goes to Penelope's house, and they have like a really interesting conversation, don't they? Where like, we knew that Cressida was going to come back. That had been spoiled. And Lecky, you and I in our predictions episode talked about the fact that we were really glad to see Cressida come back because we love her, and we think Jess Madsen does a great job. But we were really worried about what kind of Cressida she was going to return as. We were like, are they just going to bring her back as a flat villain? Because that would have been such a disservice. But instead, what you get is, yes, she is the new Lady Penwood, but she comes back with so much perspective and growth. And there's a lot of humour in there, but she's also very earnest. And she stands in front of Pen and she's like, I'm sorry.
She apologizes.
To which Pen goes, fuck off, you bitch. Get out of my face, pretty much.
I would have liked to have seen a little bit more sympathy from Penelope, who later writes about, you know, liking everybody that she's written about in her, her gossip sheet over the years.
Except for you specifically.
I really appreciated how vulnerable Cressida was with Penelope, and I wish that Penelope had maybe like softened a bit more towards her in this episode. But I just really like that they kept Cressida very three-dimensional and human. Yeah.
Veg, how did you feel having Cressida back on your screen with so many fucking bows? Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Our bow meter has imploded.
Oh my God, I know.
Resplendent in bows, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the mini arc she had. I thought it stayed true to some of the kind of personality aspects that we imagine that she would still have. She is still a bit vain. I did sort of get confused on the whole plan of it all, like how we were meant to feel about her. Was the message forgiveness? Because the Queen didn't come to her party and everyone was pretty excited about that. And then when they were like, oh, should we go to the ball? Pen like pulled a face, but then in some ways it was like, oh yeah, she's been redeemed. So there was a little bit of confusion there, so I just tried to enjoy the pink.
A very good strategy.
I liked some of the dialogue in this scene because Cressida has always been like a really interesting foil for Penelope, but she draws some really interesting parallels between herself and Penelope by saying they're like two unlikely heroines and how one can count them down but never fully out. And I feel like that's really representative of Penelope's character, and I really like that Cressida pointed out that that's something they have in common, especially because this episode, Penelope basically does the thing she always does as Lady Whistledown, where she makes these like really big decisions that kind of like change everything that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a reminder, isn't it, that like you can move past something, but the other person doesn't have to move past that thing that you've done to them. And it's like the scene that the Bridgerton girls all have together where they're talking about Cressida. And Kate is like, look, maybe we should be nice to her. Maybe we should move past things. And Pen's like, fuck that. I am not signing. When did I say I would agree to that?
Elle's like, oh, saintly Kate.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel because I think Pen is entitled because like Cressida bullied her for years, like let's not lie. And just because like we've seen a lot of Cressida's home life, Pen hasn't had that perspective, and you can understand why she very much still holds a grudge. It was still a little bit painful to like see Cressida be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then see Pen like plot to like ruin her day as thoroughly as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like, yeah, maybe they'll never get on. I think we'd hoped that at some point maybe they could, but I think that's more like Eloise and Cressida that will have that journey, whereas maybe Cressida and Pen, they'll just, you know, agree to disagree on things. But this takes us to the conservatory scene. So we're back with Benophie. How are we feeling about it's a very romantic setup, isn't it? When Hatch, well, maybe this bit isn't romantic, but Hatch is sent to collect Sophie, who I guess doesn't get a say in the matter.
It's so presumptuous of Benedict to do that, like I said.
He's like, fetch Sophie, will you?
Yeah.
And Hatch like has to toddle off. And what does it like? Sophie, your presence has been demanded by one of the masters of the house.
Yeah. But I will say the setting in the conservatory is really beautiful.
Yes, that really was. Obviously, he presents her with the Our Cottage drawing. I admit that got me a little bit. He had me there for a second.
That is very cute. But then he says he's already written to the Crabtrees and told them to prepare my cottage for their like full-time residence. And again, he's being really presumptuous and kind of pushy.
Yeah, because it's going to affect her a lot. She's not going to be able to get married ever if she moves in.
Does she want to move there? Has he asked her? Maybe she likes being in London with the girls. You know, why are we just assuming that she's going to go with him? This comes up to a point that our listener G said, and G had, like us maybe, a little bit of a disconnect from the main love story. G similarly said that they don't necessarily believe in love at first sight, so that might be sort of a bias that's impacting everything.
Yeah.
But it raises a question of, what is it between Benedict and Sophie? What is the defining aspect of the love that they share? Like, if you take the Lady in Silver, if you take the fantasy out of it, what is it that Benedict loves about Sophie? If his concern is you're not like other girls, it's like, well, he's also spent a lot of time with
women who see the world in a different way than everybody else.
Yeah, like Jen, Tilly, the person from season 2 whose name I can't remember. Sorry, what was she called?
Tessa.
That reminds me of the Vicar scene when he went, I'll never forget Nessa. And I literally said, who the fuck is Nessa?
That was the first time that I think he named her, that I remember anyway.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know who he's talking about. So, sorry, G wonders, what do we think it is that Benedict loves about Sophie, and what is it that Sophie loves about Benedict? And if there are any key moments in their story that really resonate.
That resonated with Benophie?
She's asking, what do you think makes them love each other?
I don't know.
I think Benedict I can't remember which episode, maybe it's episode 5. Benedict has that moment where he says, it's like the kite in the study at my cottage. I've never been able to pursue anything. I've never been able to commit to anything. I've never been able to find like solid ground. It's a shame they cut the line from the book about being their anchor. Who said that, Lecky?
Benedict says it in the book.
Is he going to be Sophie's anchor?
Benedict says, I'll be your anchor.
Maybe Sophie could have been Benedict's anchor because he has been like the kite floating around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what he loves about Sophie is that he's a person who he can be still with and he feels present when he's with her. Because in my life, I've been like quite floaty as well. Like I've just not really like connected to where I am or like really cared about what I've been doing. And so like I understand that notion of just feeling so out of it that you just don't care. And then like encountering something that makes you care can be like quite a profound thing to be like, oh my God, for the first time I feel invested in my own life.
He's also spent a lot of time like wandering away from society and trying to be on the fringes of society. And in 401, he sees Sophie as the Lady in Silver, as this woman who appreciates society in a way he never has and sees it in a new light, and it sees it as something that is beautiful and then also is hard for women. And I guess Benedict had never really put any thought into that before. Mm-hmm. As for Sophie,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think for Sophie,
I'll take a stab at it.
Go for it.
I love how you just came up.
He's rich.
She says she likes his smile and his
hair.
His hair.
His hair.
I think maybe for Sophie, she likes how carefree he is. You know, Sophie is very type A, very like things need to work. They need to.
Just had to be, yeah.
Yeah, because she's had to be. And then thus her personality has adjusted as such. And so it's hard for her to be still. That was like such a big, like in part 1, that was such a big thing for her, was like being still, sitting still in one place, not having to go and clean or help people or do anything, just allowing herself to be in a moment and like chill and have fun and whatever, like the kite moment. And so Benedict gives her that sense of freedom and that sense of like not carelessness but carefree attitude that she does not have for herself. And so she is so, I would say, high strung and Benedict is not, and it allows her to relax a little bit from that, to relax from that feeling. And she loves how he makes her feel in those moments.
I think she's also really drawn to two other aspects of his personality. One, his kindness, as we see in 402, when he's being really kind to Posey. And then also, I think you see a lot of this in episode 5, where his love for his family, because you have to remember that she grew up in a family where she thinks her father didn't really love her, and the only mother she's ever known was really cruel to her as well. So to see that Benedict is really loving toward his family, I feel like that kind of moves her toward him as well.
Yeah.
And I think we really have to touch a bit more on the conservatory scene in episode 6. Of course, this is when Benedict opens up to Sophie about his sexuality. And our listener Purple Cat said, "I love the Benophie chat in the summer house. It felt really honest and they both portrayed that so well. I wondered whether Ben would mention his fluid sexuality, and I'm glad he did. And Sophie also revealed that she was illegitimate. It was a great conversation that left them understanding each other better. Their acting in this scene was brilliant." Lecky, how do you feel?
I also really liked that aspect of the scene where they kind of like share their secrets with each other and kind of bear all. And I like that Sophie had basically almost no reaction beyond acceptance to Benedict admitting that he was also interested in men or attracted to men, and that was part of his identity. It was just kind of like a nothing burger for her, and I just like immediate acceptance, and I loved that.
Nothing but love.
Yeah.
And we had our listener who was mentioning that they struggle with the love at first sight trope and asked us which scenes we thought stood out between Benophie to really show the bond between them. And I think this is definitely one of them because they're both people who don't quite feel like they fit in with the rest of their world for whatever reason. Either it's their histories that make them feel different, or maybe they feel like there's a part of them that, I mean, especially Benedict, he loves his family and he has a very safe space with his family, but he doesn't feel like he fully fits in for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And I think they really see that kindred spirit within each other. These two people who don't quite fit in. But then they have the ability to open up to each other. And, you know, it's all right falling in love with people. You can fall in love left, right, and centre. But I think real, true love is finding that safety net within another person and being able to share your true self and your secrets and your thoughts. Or, you know, even with Benedict making many fuck-ups throughout this whole season, it's the ability to make mistakes and then still have a person who, I mean, if you think about it, even Sophie, when she's saying we can't be together, she's never rejecting Benedict because of who he is as a person. It's her places in society, but it's not his soul and him that she rejects. He only ever finds a loving place within her.
Haven.
Even when she's pushing him away and saying, you know, we can't do this. And I think we've criticised in the past the way that they included Benedict's sexuality in the show. Obviously not because we didn't want it to be included, but because we wanted it to be included way earlier. And they kind of teased it in season 1, but then they didn't really explore it again until kind of late in the game in season 3. And it had to be done so quickly. And I think we all would have preferred the story to have had a lot more time to breathe because it is an important story to tell. And it's such an important part of his character. But although we've had criticisms of the story in the past, I am really glad that he had this moment with Sophie.
Right.
Where he could open up and where he found just such immediate acceptance within her. It felt very natural and deserved between the two of them. It is important, of course, that, yeah, he is going to end up married to a woman, but that in no way erases his sexual identity.
Yeah.
And so it felt like an important moment for the show to address. And they did it in a really beautiful way. And I think Yeren and Luke did a great job in this scene as well. So, Purple Cat, we definitely agree they did a great job in that scene. Let's skip along to the ball then, because this is the big set piece, I think, of the episode before, obviously, John dies. There's no easy way to say it. Before the ball, Pen has gone to see the Queen, again, appealing to the Queen, saying she feels trapped by Whistledown.
Yeah.
I think it's a good speech that she makes. She makes some very valid points.
Good butterfly symbolism.
Butterfly symbolism always great. Who doesn't love that? I just like, where's the fight? Where's the conflict? I don't know.
Yeah.
But regardless, Pen decides to quit Whistledown and to make a pretty big announcement at Cressida's ball. And it turns out that the Queen is in on that. Our listener Kel said that we have the moment of Pen looking at her younger self in the mirror before the ball. That did me in. And then Are You Ready, My Love from Colin was also a sweet moment, What do you think, Lek?
Yeah, I really loved the symbolism of Penelope staring at her younger self in the mirror before retiring the Lady Whistledown persona. I just wish that they'd used actual footage of season 1 Penelope, so it was a little more realistic, because I feel like we're very familiar with what Penelope looks like now, and I feel like seeing actual footage from season 1, we would be like, oh, she looks so young, she really was a baby, she started Lady Whistledown when she was just such a young woman, and I feel like that moment would have hit harder.
Right.
And then, by the way, also, it's really funny because I think she's wearing her Marina Hates Tomatoes Spencer jacket over the baby doll starfish dress. But I feel like this moment is still really impactful because I really liked how I said earlier they played the Polin theme over it, reminding us via audio and music cues why she's comfortable giving up Lady Whistledown, because she has found love and she's in this place in her life where she is so happy and fulfilled that she is willing to give it up. But again, I just really wish they'd used actual season 1 footage of Penelope.
Yeah.
It's just slightly uncanny valley in a way that just takes me out just a little bit, which is why I wish they'd used actual footage from the show. And it doesn't even have to be, I don't know, they could have even just done like a cutaway where it's kind of like dreamy around the edges, showed us season 1 Penelope moments, like a little montage, and then came back to her.
I love that scene because it obviously ends with Colin coming into the room and he's like, are you ready, my love? And they kiss.
That was sweet.
It's like a painting.
Very sweet. I'll come back to Colin in just one second. He is very much on my mind. But we have to get to the ball first. Penn decides to get her revenge back for the events of 306 by having her Whistledown, the real Whistledown, gate crash Cressida's event. And this is where she has announced her retirement. And it's one of those like cringing moments because like Cressida's just about to make her big speech. She's put like so much effort into the ball. And then it gets completely gate crashed by the announcement that she is quitting.
But did she end up helping Cressida, like inadvertently? Because then Lady Whistledown isn't writing about how the queen never turned up to the ball.
I think it makes it an event.
Yeah. I think that's what they were trying to say, because Cressida even says, oh, this is probably a better announcement anyway. And then her and Penn have a moment where they look at each other and she's like smiling a little bit. This is what's crazy to me is that like out of all the shit that the Bridgertons have done, Cressida's the one that comes back and people are still like assholes to her. And I'm just like, you guys.
Ostracizing her. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, what did she do that was so bad?
She didn't want to marry a man 30 years her senior. I mean, come on, you know? Like, I can't hate a girl who just wants to save herself. And I know a lot of people were like, I didn't love the Cressida redemption arc, but I did, because it's like,
I did too.
We got to see Cressida and why she operated that way, because nobody acts like a certain way in a vacuum. Like, they're not just like that because that's how they are. It's usually a reflection of how society has treated them, especially in those times, and like how stuck in quotations they may be, especially as a woman in the Regency period. And so like, I think giving Cressida depth was so great and like helped her character a lot. And so I thought that this was a really like lovely scene and everything. And that you also got to see that she was like, okay, I don't need to be the center of attention. And actually this is benefiting me because people are going to be talking about this and how like, yeah, and it happened at my ball and it was this big thing and whatever. So I liked that moment.
So obviously Penn has this like complete look of like smug. She's satisfied. She's at peace with her decision, I think, that she's made. Colin is by her side. He doesn't say very much this season, does he? But the words he does say, very valuable. He says that he could not be more proud. This ties into a discussion about Penn giving a Whistledown. I don't want to talk right now about the new Whistledown, so just hold that thought in your head for a little bit. But what do we think about the decision to give up Whistledown in general? I think I said in our predictions episode that I expected it and I didn't mind as long as it was done well. But how do you feel?
I think Lecky said something earlier when she was talking about Penn giving that speech and wanting to end and everything. And she said, where was the fight? And that's how I feel too. I think that it was such a missed opportunity to have her and the queen have a really fun, playful, competitive relationship where they talk about Whistledown and they are butting heads and all this other shit. And I think like that could have been so much more fun, and then Penn's also fighting for it as well. So I don't know, I just kind of felt like she like gave it up a little too easily, in my opinion.
And I think the Queen let her give it up too easily as well. Like,
Yes.
for me, it's fine for Penn to want to quit because I understand, like, the fun has gone out of it. You know, you can do something that you really, really love and care about, and then you can just get to a point where you're just like, I'm ready to put this to bed kind of thing. However, the lack of any conflict or discussion is like a mistake to me, because I think there is a missing moment here that ties into Polin in part 2 and season 4 as a whole, and it would tie into the Lady Whistledown storyline. A lot of our listeners have pointed out that, yeah, we got some really great Colin and Penn moments throughout part 1 and part 2, but overall, like, not much was really done with them as two characters, and we had that big discussion earlier about what happens to characters after they're happy ever after. Moonpie said, even though I tried to manage my expectations about Pollen time, I still feel disappointed. I found the scenes short and lacking in depth, and still with Whistledown having undue influence. Gabby said, I'm feeling disappointed about the lack of Pollen and Colin in general. And Gabby then again made the point that while I think it's ridiculous that Pollen had all their strife over Lady Whistledown just to give it up, I don't mind that she does. I think that it makes sense that she'd want to become a novelist, but I don't know the way they went about it was the best.
You're the one who suggested to me earlier that it could have been really interesting if Colin had a conversation with Penelope first about this before she came to this decision.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, I think there is a completely missing scene between Penn and Colin talking about this, because what Gabby pointed out there was this Whistledown issue of like Penn fighting for Whistledown and refusing to give it up and it being such a big part of her identity, that like eclipsed season 3 in so many ways.
Yes.
And it became like a huge problem.
Yeah,
Colin eventually came round to it because he was like, I've realised you are Whistledown. There's no separating you. I wouldn't want to separate you. I'm so proud of who you are. So the fact that like you get to the point where she's giving up Whistledown and they don't even have a conversation about it is like the most bizarre form of storytelling to me. It's like so brushed over so that when Penn gives it up, you're just like, hang on a minute. Wasn't this your entire life? Wasn't this your entire persona? What I was saying to Lecky earlier is that think back to the end of 307 after they got married and they had that horrible scene where Colin was like, you just need to give it up. And Penn was like, you don't understand. You're a man. You don't understand what Whistledown is. And he's like, you're right. I don't. I'm off. Imagine if we have a scene where Penn goes to Colin and she's like, Colin, I've been thinking about it. I'm not getting enjoyment out of it. I don't want to write anymore. And he is like, but you are Whistledown. He's so now on her team of being Whistledown that she almost has to convince him, because he's like, but you are Whistledown. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm so on board with you being Whistledown. She has to be like, Colin, Whistledown will always be a part of me, but I need to step away from it for these reasons.
Right.
Then he's like, okay, I'll fully support you. And that would almost heal the conflict that they had in season 3, part 2.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh my God, look, he's so on board with her now and supportive now that he's backing her up, even in this massive life change. And I can assume that in the story they did have that conversation, because like there's a plan in place at the ball that the Bridgertons refer to. So they've clearly had a conversation, like she's going to give it up and this is how it's going to go about it. Once again, just like happened in season 3, we didn't see the fucking conversations.
No.
And so it just is rushed and hollow. And that would have been a really natural way to have like an increased Polin discussion, because I like a lot of the Colin moments and I like some Penn moments in season 4, but like they barely speak to each other as a couple. Even when they're like with Portia, they barely look at each other. And it's like, are we married?
Yeah.
And Nick and Newt do such a great job of making sure that even like when their characters in that background, they're always like touching or showing affection or like reacting, like at the funeral, they're like really upset. And so I feel like there is a missing scene here where Penn, it didn't need to take a long time. The Penn just needed to approach Colin and they needed to like have that conversation where he wholeheartedly supported her. And then you move into the ball and understand where she's coming from. Beans, how do you feel?
So to piggyback off of what you were saying, I simply was frustrated, I think, because it was so big that like she was like, this is my project, this is mine, and like fought so hard for it. So to give it up so easily with no fight, no pushback, no nothing, seems then why did we spend so much time on that in last season? And then on top of that, like there could have even been this moment with Colin and Penelope where Colin also like maybe confronts her about this too, where he's like, you spent all that time fighting to keep this, to keep your name on it, to keep it as your project because it's yours. And you're telling me 6 months later you want to give it up? it doesn't have to like continue to explode into that. She can then do what you said, list her reasons why it's no longer working for her, whatever. And then he goes, okay, I support you and I see where you're coming from. But like, there's nothing. So it just kind of feels like we had all of this tension. We had all of these issues between Colin and Penelope and everything in season 3 for it just to be fucking tossed to the wind. And it's like, then why were we even doing that last season if it was all for naught?
And for me, it's not even just about season 3. Like, if you remember in our last rewatch that we did for season 3, I said I really don't like the resolution that they had between the Queen and Whistledown as a concept.
Yes.
However, I said I'm sure that in season 4 there's plenty of ways that they can make that a redeeming story, because it's been a massive driving force throughout the whole show from season 1. And they won't let like such an important thing go. However, I said we weren't going to talk about the new Whistledown, but quickly here, it feels like the show is going, Pen can just go over there because we've got a new Whistledown and that's going to be a new drama. And that does such a disservice to the brand and the work and the art that she created.
Yes.
Pen just going, oh, I've given it up now, bye. And the Queen not really giving a shit. I'm just like, 4 years of build up for the Queen to be like, no problem, have fun.
Again, so she gives it up, and then this new Whistledown comes, and it's like, okay, so she's not gonna fight for that either, because she's not. They're not gonna do that in season 5. It's also then it's kind of like, okay, so then why would you then introduce in season 3 Cressida being another Whistledown? I know it's part of the story, but like, if that was the case, why not then push that into a different season? And then we could have stretched out Whistledown, because Whistledown didn't need to be confined to season 3 at all.
Maybe this would have just been a little more believable if they'd stretched it out a bit in part 2 and had Penelope retire in episode 8.
Yeah.
Because I feel like episode 6 was also very early, and like the Queen giving in so suddenly was a bit forced.
Yeah.
So maybe just pushing those scenes toward the end of part 2 would have made that feel just a little more realistic.
Or like Pen going to the Queen says, you're not quitting under any circumstances. And then Pen plots to do it anyway. And that's like a conflict that the Queen's like, oh my God, you went against what I said. And then Pen's like, yeah, because I'm Whistledown, I can do what the fuck I want. I might not be writing her anymore, but it's still who I am.
Or they tied into the bet. If I get this bet correct, I get to leave Whistledown.
What bet?
Well, to bring in the wager, what was the wager?
Right.
I don't know.
Nothing was resolved, but like there was nothing at stake, you know? It would have been interesting if like Pen had been thinking about it, whatever. They introduce a wager. Pen goes to her and she goes, I have an upgrade to your wager. After she's like, no, you can't retire. She goes, if Benedict gets married, I get to retire. And she's like, well, if he doesn't get married, you don't get to retire.
Yeah, redo the wager.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Beans.
No, you're fine.
But because in part 1, we don't know what the wager was for. So unless they're revisiting that in the future seasons, I would have liked in part 2 for them to redo the wager and actually tell us what the stakes are. And the stakes are her being able to give up Lady Whistledown.
Yes.
That would have been way more interesting.
So much more interesting.
Well, our listener, Abby, said, what happened with the bloody wager?
Well...
They set it up, mentioned it several times along the way, and then nothing. No payoff. Seriously, I don't get it.
No, she said at the end she won the wager. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut. I'm getting very passionate now.
Well, there is a theory, Beans. I don't know if you've read it. Avila has kind of brought this up. What do you think the wager was? And do you think it ties into her allowing someone else to write Whistledown? That sounds like a reasonable solution to not needing to redo the whole Pen being angry over someone impersonating her. But I it's one of those things, and I mean this with all the love in the world for the show, but sometimes there's like really great ideas like that where it's like, maybe the reason they didn't mention this is because they really thought through something that's going to happen in a future season. And we've done that so many times.
Or it's just a plot hole.
Where like it ends up just being a plot hole.
Right.
So I would love for it to have been like the Queen is now in control of Whistledown because that's what was at stake. But I just think they forgot to mention it.
Well, but the thing is they gave off the impression that they were betting off of Benedict, right? But there was no real wager. There was nothing. There was no wager. Nothing was said, oh, if I get it correctly, this happens. Or if you get it correctly, there was nothing. And so that's the thing is Bridgerton is so tell, don't show. And then the one time it's like, we need you to tell us. You're like, because she even addresses it at the end. She goes, well, I guess I won the wager. Huh? How? What happened? What wager did you fucking win?
While we're at Cressida's ball, though, we did receive another great blink and miss it Polin moment. I absolutely love how they're slow dancing when everyone else is doing more intricate choreography around them, kind of stealing this little intimate moment for themselves in a room full of people. Nick and Luke are so good at doing these like little moments in the background. They're just great.
Yeah. We've said, you know, like we think that Polin didn't really have enough to do as a couple in this season. However, what you have to say is that Nick and Newt always like fully commit to character, even if they're just in the background of the shot or something. It's like one of the joys of watching this season is just like watching out for them and like what they're up to. And even like John's funeral, when he was like holding her so closely, I was like, oh, my heart.
Yeah. And then when they're doing the stag dance, the little J gets so reminiscent of season 1 Polin.
That is like 101.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. They dance in every season. Thank the Lord. Jack Murphy, blessings to you. Well, before we end the episode, of course, there is something that's got to happen. Let's have one last night together, though, shall we? Because before tragedy hits, we're still at the ball and there is a really beautiful moment. Lecky, take it away. Try not to cry.
Okay. I was telling Veg this earlier that this was more emotional to me than Fran discovering John's death. This was the most emotional scene to me in part 2. I thought it was super well written, super well acted. It made me weep each time I watched it. And in fact, last night I watched it like 3 times in a row and cried each time. But it happens to be, oh no, I'm getting teary.
Let me just preface. Lecky, while she's crying, before the show came out, a few days before the show came out, the soundtrack was announced, wasn't it? Right.
Yeah.
And so we were there like, oh, look, these are the songs. Yeah. I'm not laughing like it's not funny, but I am laughing.
No, it is actually really funny. I like some dark humor.
These are the songs for part 2. And I'm like, oh, there's Fields of Gold. I bet you any money that'll be about John dying. Lecky then goes.
that was my dad's funeral song. So like, and I generally don't listen to the song because it's really upsetting. Even like when my husband and we went and eloped and it came on the radio and I immediately started crying. It's a song it's really hard for me to listen to.
You were never going to go through this well.
I also have a connection with Fields of Gold.
Oh, do you? A sad one?
No.
Oh.
So let me flip the switch so you can compose yourself.
Go ahead.
So when I was a youngin', I lived in Boston for a period of time, and every year a whole horde of Irish people come over, just by the pack loads. And they all live in one apartment that's got 2 bedrooms. There's 7 of them. They split it, so the rent's only $34. I became friends with them because they were at my job that I was working at in the tourist industry at the time, so I could pay for school that I dropped out of. Context. I go to a house party. They find out I'm going to music school. They ask me if I can sing. For 2 hours, I had to keep singing Fields of Gold over and over again. Because a new Irish person would come up and be like, oh, you know the Fields of Gold song? And I'd be like, yeah, I've been singing it all fucking night, buddy. Fucking Siobhan.
That's way more traumatic than what Lecky went through. Lecky, your story pales in comparison.
If we have any Irish listeners, is Fields of Gold a big thing in Ireland? I'm just curious.
They just like kept asking me, and I was like, damn, I didn't realize it was such a hit.
So both Lecky and Beans were primed to be destroyed by this scene.
Exactly.
So Lecky, what happened to you?
So the music made me emotional just from the time it kicked in, but I really like how the setting is like very similar to where they first met outside the ball in 303.
Goddamn.
Having snuck outside to have that kind of like moment in the silence together, and how like John is staring up at the moon and appreciating its beauty. It's like so moving. And I really like that they gave him an opportunity to tell Fran, oh no, all the things he loves about her. I can't do it.
She's crying.
Just imagine me like on the footsteps of like a house in like in South Boston. Just I won't sing it.
I like that he told her like all the things that she could remember for. No, I can't do it. Oh no, Lex. Why don't you read it for me?
I'll read it. She's gone. She's absolutely gone.
Oh my goodness.
Let me get Lecky's notes up.
We love you, Lek.
Remember the ducks.
Lecky's note says, my dog is squeaking in the background with the toy, so this is the context. It said, made me weep each time I watched it. Happens to be my dad's funeral song, so that doesn't help. in a setting like the one they first met, having snuck outside the ball.
Sorry.
The way he stares up at the moon, just appreciating its beauty, is so moving.
Yeah.
And it's also nice that he had a chance to tell Fran things that she'd probably remember for years to come. I love that you went probably. There's a chance. About how she was the perfect wife and eventually with the perfect mother and he loved her, etc. Very romantic, Lecky. Since he was going to die so soon. And then he says, I love you, Francesca. And she says, I love you, John Sterling, always. Are you okay, Lek? You back?
Yeah, I'm fine now. Sorry.
She's back.
One other thing I really liked is earlier in this episode, Fran is really upset and she says that like Michaela has upset their routine. I feel like they implied that John set up this moment with Fran to kind of like reestablish their routine and show that he was like taking the time to appreciate her in an environment where Michaela wasn't, so they could have this moment together because he knew she was a little upset about that. And then also he says, in the dialogue, he says, I am moved beyond silence, but there's like kind of a pause, and I am moved beyond, I feel like is foreshadowing for his death. Sorry, guys. Jesus Christ, sorry.
God damn.
Poor, she's okay. The fact that like it perfectly mirrors the way that they met in 303 is like really heartbreaking.
Really moving, yeah.
And of course, to cut to the end of the episode, you have the moment of the puzzle where they're doing the puzzles together.
Oh, that's really beautiful too.
Fran's in the middle and they're on either side of her, and it's the sky and the ground. They put the final piece together into the puzzle, and the puzzle piece is half a bit of the ground and half a bit of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
John is her solid ground where she's felt so safe and so seen.
And he's going 6 feet under in the ground.
Also that. And then Michaela is like the possibility of the future and like the dreaming and her future.
I really liked the symbolism of the puzzle too, and I really like Michaela as the sky. John, as you said, the ground is someone who made her feel safe, but Michaela, we've been told, is someone who will challenge her, and I feel like her being the sky is someone who will encourage her to spread her wings and soar. I thought that was some really beautiful symbolism.
Yeah, and also rather than looking down, she's looking up at what opportunities will be presented to her.
In the future, yeah.
And I love how understated this scene was, because you could have easily gone for like, this is John's last ever scene. And like, I think Victor Ali did such a great job.
God, I love him. I want the best for him.
I'm going to like follow his career religiously because it's...
Same.
He's such a compelling actor and I really appreciate what he did. Lecky, he had a comment about this scene, didn't he?
Yeah, he said that he was told when they were filming the scene to maybe like touch his head as if he had a headache, and he questioned that decision from like a directing standpoint and an acting standpoint, because he was like, no, I really want it to be like kind of understated. I don't want it to be about John's about to die. I want it to be about this like moment of like his last moment of looking at the people that he loves, and kind of it being an ordinary moment, which I think is what makes it so heartbreaking, is that it's such a real moment as opposed to kind of hamming it up a little bit and having him touch his head, you know, as he's leaving the room.
But also from like an actor's perspective, like he's leaving a massive role. He could have been so entitled to like make this moment really about him. I don't feel that. And the last thing he ever sees is the two girls that he loves the most in the world together, happy and like
united.
There's a sense of Fran's going to be okay. Not now, but she will, because she's got Michaela. And then of course, the second that he said he had a headache, jeez Louise, we were complete wrecks, I will say. Like, I was like shaking violently at this point. And then Francesca goes into the room and it's like shot. Can you hear the squeaking of my dog? So John's dying and she's just going squeaky, 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 squeaky.
I can hear it over me. Try not to cry.
What I'm fascinated by is like, if you had no idea, listeners, if you're listening, you probably knew John was going to die. If you were watching the show with anybody who didn't know he was going to die, please let me know their reactions, because how utterly, and this is true of death, how utterly blindsided for her to go into that room. She's talking. Yeah. Oh God, it's like horrific. She's like talking to her husband who's dead in the bed.
Yeah.
Lecky, do you remember the Mr. Bean thing that I told you that I couldn't stand when people going about something normal and something bad had happened?
Right.
And she turns, and they were very respectful in the show. They were very insistent on not showing his body because that's like a private thing and it's a real thing. And all you hear is this horrendous scream. Utterly horrific. Like, it's a chilling scream. And Michaela's reaction.
Yeah, and the cut to the portrait behind Michaela as she's leaving. Oh, that's so heartbreaking.
But if it's any consolation, on a happy note before we go into episode 7, Hannah and Victor have had a great time filming that scene. They were laughing, they were joking. Victor was doing roly-polies on the bed.
Yeah, I loved that. That made it way easier to rewatch, to be honest, knowing that they had such fun teasing each other about giving the performance of their lives and stuff as they were filming this. And apparently Victor was like somersaulting and rolling across the bed like upset. Aww. That's hilarious.
And every time I got serious, they would go, ah.
Sorry to interrupt John's death. I don't really know how to segue into a different discussion. Rest in peace, John. We are so bereft here on the podcast, / we actually recorded a massive episode that is far too long and there is no human way that we can make it one episode. So we've had to chop into 2.
Yeah. Anybody who sees the length is just going to run away. So
yes. So sorry to sort of steal your thunder here, John, a bit. But yes, we're going to pause here. We'll give you all a bit of time to grieve. Lecky, you can keep crying in your little corner if you like. And we will be back at an undisclosed time with part 2 of our season 4, part 2 rewatch. So in the next episode, we're going to talk more about episode 7, episode 8, and then potentially have a little chat about season 5, like.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
See if we think it's going to be Fran or Elle. Spoiler, we think it's going to be Elle.
Right.
And if you're hearing this and it's already been announced and it's Fran, well, just clowns. Nothing new.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, where can everyone find us, Lecky?
You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at whatabarb.pod. You can also find us on all podcast platforms. If you prefer watching your podcasts with some beautiful collages, we're also on YouTube.
And you can find us at Patreon at patreon.com/whatabarbpod. But until then, Beans, do us the honour and sing us out.
Das violin. Do 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 do. Do 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 do.